The Rafto Prize has come at a time when the world needs to understand very clearly that there is a very strong and direct and inseparable link between climate justice and human rights. We're seeing around the world today some very unusual weather events. We're seeing extreme droughts, we're seeing extreme flooding, and we're seeing destruction of properties and lives. This clearly shows that if action is not taken to tackle global warming, more people are going to lose their lives and the planet is threatened. So this is a very important prize indeed. I feel personally humbled and also very much challenged because it means that what has been done must be amplified.
What started your engagement for climate issues?
Well, I come from Africa, and you know, Africa is the most vulnerable continent because for every single 1 degree change in temperature, Africa experiences a multiplied level of temperature increase, about 50% more than any other region in the world. Africa is having more impacts on global warming, whereas Africa contributes very little to global warming. Then it really gets my blood boiling, and I know that this is one issue that needs to be focused on. Moreover, climate issue is a global issue. Not one nation, not one people can feel exempted from the impacts, and nobody's ready for it. Nobody. If you judge from what we're seeing now, whether it's a rich country or a poor country, nobody can withstand unusual or freak weather events.
Can you describe how it is for people to live in the Niger Delta today?
The situation in Niger Delta is that much of the water people depend on for drinking, for cooking, for washing, has had very high level of hydrocarbon pollution from the oil industry. Because many of the oil wells in the Niger Delta are rich in crude oil and natural gas. Now, when the two are extracted together and piped to a central location where the gas is separated from the oil, and then what could be done is to collect the gas, process it, to be used as liquefied natural gas, or to be re-injected into a well. But what has been happening in Nigeria over many decades now is just that this associated gas is simply set on fire. So you have belching infernos burning 24 hours for decades across the Delta. And some are burning right in the middle of communities, not at the top of stacks, some at horizontal level, right at the ground level. They're roaring like I don't know what. It's like you exploding rockets continuously in the middle of where people live. And the toxic elements from these flares cause asthma, bronchitis, leukemia, all kinds of diseases. And also the oxides, the sulfur oxides and nitrogen oxides in the gas mixed with moisture in the atmosphere and fall down as acid rain on people and on their properties and crops. But so you have a situation where people are born in pollution, they live in pollution, they die in pollution, they are buried in pollution. Because the average life expectancy in the Niger Delta is 41 years. 41 years. I mean, this is clearly caused by the level of pollution in the area. So people like me are like living ancestors.
But how can people manage to live there?
I think basically that people are always hopeful. People believe that things will change. They believe that government will be responsive. They believe that corporations will change. I like to look at corporations sometimes as, well, if men can train lions and tigers and elephants, wild animals to behave in a way that is acceptable, why can't corporations change?
But who has the responsibility for this oil pollution in your country?
The Nigerian government and the oil corporations work in joint partnership. It's a kind of agreement system that was set up by the military in a way that both are complicit in this unholy wedlock. They are responsible for pollution in the Niger Delta, but the oil companies are the operators in all these agreements. So principally, the oil companies are guilty and responsible for the pollution. And they know that they cannot do what they do in Nigeria anywhere else in the world. People are dying, the environments are dying. In fact, some places you just look at, I don't like to make people feel scared, but some of the environments are simply dead. And we can't allow this ecocide. Ecocide is a crime. It has to be made formally to be a crime. So that if people can be tried for genocide, for war crimes, for crimes against humanity, why shouldn't people be tried for crimes against the environment?
You are deeply concerned about the climate worldwide. What do you think is the biggest challenge with the climate in a global perspective?
The major reason we're having the problem is because of the polluting sources of energy. Energy production dependent on fossil fuels are the major cause of global warming. Coal, gas, tar sands, crude oil. So this is the main thing the world has to know that the crude oil civilization has gone as far as it could go. For over 150 years, the world has depended on fossil fuel for energy production. It's now time to abandon this archaic form of energy, so polluting, so destructive, and invest in renewable energy. Every year at the climate change negotiations, governments are moving more and more away from making commitments and having measurable reduction of emissions at source. A country like Norway is engaged more in what is known as carbon offsetting, which is a false solution to global warming, which means you keep on polluting at home and then you buy what is known as a carbon sink somewhere else. You pay for some forest somewhere.
So what should Norway then do?
They have to invest more in renewable energy, stop depending on fossil fuels, not expand oil fields, don't open up any oil field in Lofoten, for example, which is a different argument. If oil fields are open in Lofoten, it challenges my cultural diet at home in Nigeria, because we depend on cod being exported to us from Norway, and that is a breeding ground for cod. So going there to drill for oil in Lofoten just means simply polluting and destroying the source of that very important item of cultural food. Already the country is being seen as the best example of how this industry can be run to make the country self-reliant, to make country rich and everything, and of course put technology for it. So Norway can also show example of how to move away from something that appears to be so beneficial, whereas because we know it's not beneficial in the real sense in terms of the climate.
What can every one of us do to ease the pressure on the climate?
The less we're dependent on resources, on intensive extraction and extreme wasteful use of resources, the more we stand a chance of surviving as a people on the planet. People have to learn to use less energy, which will be beneficial to the climate. Where you can walk, don't drive. If you're not, we talk about energy efficiency.
But you take a plane. We
Yeah,
all take plane.
Yes,
too.
I have a guilty conscience each time I have to fly. But we need to meet, to mobilize. There are certain things we just have to do as a short-term measure, because no matter what you do, one lifetime is a short-term thing. We don't own Mother Earth. Mother Earth owns us. We're just a part of the ecosystem. We may pride ourselves being masters of everything, but at the end of the day, the earth is the mother. And we're just here for a short time, and we need to be accountable and respectful about the way we use our resources so as to ensure that future generations would have a chance of enjoying what is being bestowed upon various nations by nature. But right now we're having politicians who behave as if they're from Mars or from Mercury or somewhere else.
Why do you think that people in power, like the politicians, don't manage to solve the climate crisis we experience today?
Politicians have very short visions. Many countries, they have only 4 years. Their longest vision is 4 years. They see their vision is marked by one election after the other. They just about, when they leave office, they're retiring. They go to one summer house or somewhere, and enjoy their life with cigars and wine. And now part of the problem for their children and their children's children. They simply don't care what happens to the young people. When I went to the climate negotiation in Copenhagen, I saw many young people who wore a T-shirt they had a caption that was so important to me, and I've not forgotten it. They wore this T-shirt that said, "How old would you be in 50 years?" I think they really put their finger on it. Because many of the negotiators and the political leaders who sit down in green rooms or in the plenaries to make decisions, some are already 60 years, 70 years old. I can tell you not many of them will be around in 50 years' time. Regime continues the way it's continuing now. In 20 years, it's going to be catastrophic all over the world. It's going to be disastrous all over the world. I wish they could see themselves as leaders of today. They should stop that talk of being leaders of tomorrow. The youth must be the leaders of today, because the elders have failed. They failed the youths. The elders have become myopic. They can't see beyond their noses. If you take 5% or 10% of the military budget of the rich nations, the money invested in bombing countries, in producing weapons that are not needed, the money invested in destruction rather than building, this will be more than enough to fund the climate resilience and mitigation measures. And it's got to be young people who would say, no, we are not going to sacrifice our lives in needless wars. We are not going to wait and see rich nations invest billions and billions of dollars in war equipment that are not needed. I understand there's even some aircraft that are so expensive they can't be put into combat. They're too expensive to be deployed. There are over 14 billion bullets in the world today. The world has just 7 billion people in the world. What is this? So the petroleum industry and the military complex, they've held the world by the throat. And young people have to speak up, otherwise they have no future. It is time that rich countries and powerful or weak governments begin to see how destructive their actions are and pull the brakes and do something. And let's understand that the environment is just one environment. And we have one planet. There's no planet B or C or D.